I, 20M, am not sure how to handle a situation with my GF, 21F. TLDR, GF is acting SUS and is asking for a break. I didn't handle it well and would like advice on what to do. Long story. I, Alan, 20M, met her, Chris, 21F, while at a soccer tournament in another country. I was 13 at the time and never even thought about girls. I was a two-sport athlete and it was the summer before going to high school for me. Yes, I was 16 when I graduated HS. Her younger brother was playing in the same tournament. I'll never forget how we met. I was walking down the hallway and towards the lobby of the hotel when I saw two beautiful girls walking towards me. To my right was a sandy blonde extremely sexual-looking girl with all the right curves, and to my left was probably the cutest girl you could imagine with bleach blonde curly hair, big green eyes and fairy-like features. You can imagine my surprise when they both stopped in front of me with the cute one saying, "Hey Alan, how are you feeling?" I just looked at her with what I'm sure was some form of stupid and confused. She just smiled, held out her drink and asked if I wanted a sip. I thanked her but mentioned that I was just heading to the lobby to grab myself a soda. She and her friend just said, "Great, we'll join you." I was very shy back then and really had no clue how to behave. All I could say was, "Sure," and start walking. They walked beside me, one on each side, and were talking across me. The cute one, Chris, was answering the sexy ones, Sandy, questions about how she knew me. Basically Chris mentioned her brother and I remembered that he and I had played on the same team a few years ago. Since then I was moved up to the older age group. When we got to the lobby I realized what was happening. The lobby was bustling with players in the tournament. I could see many of them staring at me and could sense some tension when they saw this tall skinny dude walk in with a beautiful blonde on each side of me. I was a bit stunned by this, but I also got a huge boost to my confidence. I went to the hotel confectionery to get my soda. Sandy saw someone she knew so she said a quick, "Nice meeting you Alan," and went over to a group of guys. Chris stayed at my hip while I made my purchase. She asked if we could sit over on a sofa to finish our drinks and I said, "Sure." We sat and did what I can only describe as flirting. I was 13, it was pretty pathetic, and talked about family, friends, whatever for a couple of hours. I walked her to her room, she was with her parents and brother, then went to my room. Didn't sleep a wink because I couldn't get her out of my head. Finished the tournament and called her the day I got home, with my mom's encouragement, LOL. We started dating a few weeks later and have been a couple for 7 years now. From my perspective, the relationship has been perfect. She supported me and I supported her. She was my first everything. I was her first lover. She was a figure skater and I sat at her side when she wrecked her knee to the point of surgery. She wasn't under any illusion that she could be a pro, but it still hurt her a lot. I, however, did want to chase my dream. I ended up playing semi-pro hockey but never made it to the bigs. We had a LDR for 3 years but were able to make it work. She went to school and finished a nursing certificate. I returned from chasing my dream and started university. My scholarships covered all my costs and I thought life was perfect. She was working, I was schooling, we would hang out every other waking moment and were both starting to talk about next steps. Then it happened. This past weekend we decided to join a couple of my old friends, Chad and Daryl, from HS, not my close-knit group but we did keep in touch over the years, at a football game at my university. We met up for pre-game drinks, talked about the old days, and were having some pretty good laughs. When watching the game, we had our usual hidden libations and I started to notice that Chris was getting pretty tipsy. She was pretty engrossed in whatever Chad had to say while also keeping Daryl's attention. I tried to get her attention a few times but either she wasn't interested in anything I had to say or couldn't hear me in the crowd. It was after the game when it became clear to me that this could be a problem. Chris started walking out of the stadium with me but then jumped ahead to walk and talk with Chad. Daryl then jumped ahead to the other side of her and I got to watch the three of them walking together ahead of me without a worry in the world. Laughing, teasing each other, and generally just acting weird and friendly. We got to Daryl's vehicle, he didn't drink, and Chris and Chad got in the back. As I had mentioned, I'm tall, 6 feet 5 inches, 220 pounds, and usually get the passenger seat by default so this wasn't necessarily something to worry about. During the ride home Chad was mooning the world from the back seat and Chris was egging him on. They were laughing away at anything each other said without ever once trying to involve me. It was ridiculous and disrespectful. I was pissed. We dropped Chad off first, he clowned around in the back seat until I just looked him in the eye and said GTFO I'd like to get home tonight. Chris shot me a wicked glance at that point. We dropped Chris off next. I walked her drunk ass to her parents' door. Gave her a weak kiss and told her to drink some water and I'll call her tomorrow. On the way to dropping me off I looked at Daryl and asked him if that all seemed weird. He just said, "Nah, Chris has always been friendly and clearly had too much to drink." He went on to say, "She only has eyes for you dude." I drank my liter of water and put my drunk ass to bed. Woke up this morning, texted Chris, "Good morning beautiful," went on my morning run, then got myself to school. She texted me around 10 a.m. saying good morning, I'm hungover and my shift starts in an hour. I'll call around 8 tonight when I get back home. I finished my classes at 3. Stuck around the uni until 6 finishing my readings and organizing notes. I then grabbed her favorite fast food before heading to her parents' place at 7:30. I knew this was going to be a big conversation. There were a couple of times in HS when I had to talk with her about being overly flirty when drinking. She always owned her actions, apologized, cried and most importantly made it clear that she loves me and would never do anything to hurt me. I expected the same tonight but I was wrong. She rolled up to the house at about 7:45, I was on the porch waiting for her. I was a bit surprised to see that she was on her phone when she parked. She didn't notice me until I stood up and the motion sensor popped the porch light on. She looked at me then stared back at her dash saying goodbye to whomever she was talking to. I held up the paper bag of food as she was walking up and said, I thought you'd be hungry and we may as well eat while we chat. She just walked up, hugged me, looked up into my eyes and said, I know, in an almost hoarse voice. She took me by my hand and walked me to the porch. It was then that I knew in my heart that this wouldn't be our usual conversation. I started on the offensive as soon as we sat down. WTF was up with you last night? She had a sorrowful look in her eyes and just said, I know, I was just caught up in HS memories you know, I just was reminiscing about hanging out with those guys, smoking pot and playing drinking games. I kinda miss those days when everyone had nothing but fun on their mind, she said with a bit of a smile. Well, it looked like you were having one heck of a time with Chad last night, I said sarcastically. She just buried her face in her hands and said, sorry, in an almost whisper. I leaned closer trying to stare her straight in the eyes and said, what was that? I didn't quite hear you. That's when she stood up and screamed, I'm sorry Alan. Did you hear that? I was definitely not ready for that. I was surprised and stunned. She'd never screamed at me before. All I could do was look up at her as she stood above me shaking. That's when she said the fateful words, I think we need to take a break. I continued to look up at her, just trying to comprehend what was happening. She then just started rambling and for the life of me I can't remember what she was saying. I've never had that happen before. I've always listened to everything she said and truly heard her thoughts and feelings, but this time it was like someone had hit me with a hammer and my ears were just ringing. By the time it stopped her rant had ended. I just looked up at her, she was bawling uncontrollably, as was I to be honest. I choked out a simple question, so we're done. She put her hands on my cheeks, it felt like a mother's warmth just flowed into my face. She placed her forehead on mine and her beautiful scent filled my nostrils. She then softly said, I hope not. I just need to know what life without you is like. We've been together for 7 years and I don't know what I want from a relationship. All I know is what we do and have done. Don't you ever wonder if you want or need something different? That gave me a jolt. I stood straight up, towering over her, staring down upon her and growled, so you want to date other people but don't think we're done? She collapsed into her chair and curled herself into a tiny ball. It was everything I could do to not grab her in my arms to try and comfort her. She just kept saying, no, no. She then blurted through the sobs, do you know that there hasn't been a day in the past 7 years where we haven't talked? I quickly retorted, why wouldn't we talk? I need to know who I am Alan. She said quietly. What I'm asking for is space. I need to make sure that I know who I am. I'm asking for 3 months of no contact. 3 months of me making my own decisions without thinking about you, asking your thoughts, getting your opinions. I know that this is going to hurt us both, but I love you so much that I think we'll be stronger if we know who we are as individuals. I'm asking for us to take a break until December 15th. We can then get back together and start finalizing our plans to move in with each other in the new year. I stared at her as she continued to just heave in her little ball and stated, your plan only works if we are loyal to each other. I don't understand, she said. Have you ever not felt hurt, Chris? No, she said. I then followed with, have either of us ever made a decision about us without knowing the other's thoughts? No, we talk about everything, Alan. She said as she started to stare up at me. I looked back at her with as soft a gaze as I could muster and said, I get that I'm imposing, I get that I'm very demanding on myself and you, but I also know that you are the most influential person in my life. You've shown me when and how to be empathetic, you've shown me that life isn't a straight line. We've dealt with so much together and I actually dread who I would be without you. My point being that as long as our choices over the next 3 months always give consideration to each other's thoughts and feelings, then yes, maybe this will help. Let's just make sure we remain loyal to each other during no contact. Does that make sense? That's when she ripped my guts out with a simple statement. I'm not sure that thinking about you during this time accomplishes anything, Alan. You'll be in my heart, but I need to make sure that my choices are mine without considering you. That's the point where I just walked away grunting. I hope that you're still my love on December 15th. I could still hear her wailing as I got in my car and drove away. So there it is, Reddit verse. This shaking, sobbing mess has one simple question. What do I do in this situation?